It was supposed to be just another night shift at the McDonald's on the edge of town. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I should have known that something was off the moment I walked through the back door. The air was thick, colder than usual, and the lights flickered in a way that made the shadows stretch longer than they should have. I was closing tonight with Andy, a guy I'd worked with for a couple of months. We had our usual routine: count the drawers, clean up the fryers, and scrub down the counters until everything gleamed. But when I walked past the storage room, I noticed something strange. The door to the walk-in freezer was cracked open, and I swear I heard a muffled sound, like something, or someone, was inside. I froze for a second, trying to shake off the creeping chill down my spine. Andy had already gone to the back to check on the soda machine, so I was alone in the front. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer, feeling a mix of dread and unease building up inside. The freezer door creaked as I nudged it open, revealing nothing but the usual stock of frozen burgers and fries. But there was something wrong. Something felt off. I stepped back, ready to close it, but that's when I saw it, a faint mark on the ground. It wasn't ketchup or grease, but something darker, smeared in a jagged line leading deeper into the freezer. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I called out to Andy, but there was no answer. My heart started pounding in my chest, and the air seemed to thicken with every passing second. Just as I turned to leave, I felt something cold brush against my leg. My skin prickled. There was no one else in the room, and yet the sensation was unmistakable. I turned back to the freezer, my breath shallow and quick, but the door slammed shut behind me. I don't know what made me open the freezer door again, but I did. The cold air hit me like a wave, making my breath catch in my throat. It was as if the temperature had dropped even lower. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder than usual, and the faint humming of the refrigerator filled the silence. I reached for the door, but this time, I felt something different. A sharp chill that didn't just come from the freezer itself, this felt like it came from within me. Something was watching me. I wasn't alone. I hesitated, but the need to understand what was happening tugged at me. I swung the door open all the way. And then I saw it. Lying on the floor inside the freezer, sprawled out like a discarded ragdoll, was Andy. His face was frozen in a grimace, eyes wide open but lifeless. A thin trail of blood ran from the corner of his mouth, staining the once white tile beneath him. But it wasn't just the blood that chilled me, it was the way his limbs were twisted, contorted unnaturally, like he'd been pulled in all directions at once. I staggered back, my mind racing, but I couldn't take my eyes off of him. The air seemed to grow colder with each second, and I felt an icy draft creep up my spine. There was no way he could have gotten in there on his own, not with the freezer locked from the inside. And yet, there he was. My stomach churned. I had to leave. I had to get out of there. But the thought of what might happen if I turned my back on this, whatever this was, kept me rooted in place. I could hear the sound of something moving behind me, scraping against the floor, but when I spun around, there was nothing. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint but unmistakable, whispered from the corner of the room. "You shouldn't have come back." I spun toward the sound, but the room was empty. I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, my legs refusing to move. The voice was gone, but the air remained heavy with its lingering presence. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run as fast as I could and never look back, but my feet wouldn't obey. I glanced back at Andy. His body hadn't moved, but something about the way his eyes seemed to follow me made my skin crawl. I couldn't tear my gaze away from him. He was dead. He had to be. There was no way he could still be alive after what I'd seen. But that whisper, it didn't make sense. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the freezer, my eyes darting around the room as if I could find some explanation for what was happening. My fingers brushed the door handle, cold as ice, and I pulled it shut with a finality that I hoped would end this nightmare. But as the door clicked into place, I heard something even worse than the whispers. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. They were coming from behind me. My heart stopped. I didn't have to look. I could feel it, the presence behind me, something far too close. My body screamed at me to move, but my mind couldn't process anything fast enough. I was paralyzed with fear. "Andy." I whispered, my voice barely audible, but there was no response. I slowly turned around, half expecting to see a figure standing there, but there was nothing. Just the empty, dimly lit restaurant, as quiet as it had been for the past hour. The hum of the machines, the clattering of distant utensils, the low buzz of the overhead lights, it all felt normal, and yet it was all wrong. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and took a step back toward the counter. The footsteps behind me had stopped, but I still felt them. The weight of something in the room with me. Something watching, waiting. Then, without warning, the freezer door creaked open again. I froze. It was like it was calling me. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening, even if it killed me. I turned back toward the freezer, this time stepping forward without hesitation. The freezer door stood ajar, an invitation, or a warning. The frigid air blasted my face like a slap, and I had to fight the urge to turn and run. My feet felt glued to the floor as if the very air around me was holding me in place. I peered inside, but there was no longer any sign of Andy's body. The freezer was empty. I was sure I hadn't imagined it, the blood, the twisted limbs, the expression of terror frozen on his face. But now, there was nothing. Only rows of frozen food and empty shelves. The freezer hummed quietly, and for a moment, I wondered if my mind was playing tricks on me. Was I hallucinating? Was it exhaustion? But that voice, that whisper, still echoed in my ears. "You shouldn't have come back." I stepped forward, my fingers brushing the cool metal shelf. I was losing my mind. I had to be. There was no other explanation. And then it happened. A cold hand, sharp and clammy, gripped my shoulder. I gasped and spun around, but there was no one there. No figure, no face, just the heavy weight of the unseen touch that lingered on my skin, like it had burned its coldness into my very flesh. The lights above me flickered violently, the hum growing louder and more erratic. Panic surged through me. Something wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. The temperature in the room dropped further. I could see my breath now, misting in front of me. My pulse raced as I backed up toward the kitchen. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I whipped around, but the kitchen was dark. The grill lights were off, the fryers silent. Everything was still, too still. It felt like the room was holding its breath. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling, but the screen remained black, no signal. My stomach twisted as I realized how utterly isolated I was. Alone. But then I heard it again. The footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing from the hallway. The sound grew louder, closer. I felt the presence again, creeping up behind me. And with each step, my heart pounded faster, as if it knew something I didn't. I was not alone. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The oppressive weight of the darkness in the kitchen pressed down on me like a physical force. I could feel the cold on my skin, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was deeper, more primal, like a presence, something ancient, hanging just out of sight. I took another step back, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was crouching there, waiting to strike. Then, I heard a soft, guttural growl. It wasn't human. It wasn't even an animal. It was something worse. I froze, my blood running cold. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by the faint scraping of nails against the floor. My breath caught in my throat as I turned slowly, my body shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, my legs felt like they were encased in concrete. The growl came again, followed by the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, scraping across the floor. The noise came from the back of the kitchen, the corner where the storeroom and the old freezer met. I forced myself to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was like the fear was paralyzing me, freezing me in place. Then, the lights flickered and went out entirely. Darkness. Absolute, suffocating darkness. For a split second, I thought maybe my mind had finally snapped, that I was losing my grip on reality. But then I felt it. The air shifted. The presence behind me was no longer just a feeling, it was something tangible, something that was breathing down my neck. I whipped around, my hands outstretched, searching for something, anything, to grab onto. But there was nothing. Just empty air and the unsettling sensation of something watching, stalking me. The growl came again, but this time, it was right behind me. It was too close. My heart nearly stopped in my chest. And then, as if the world had gone mad, I felt it. A cold hand, no, a claw, gripped my arm with an unnatural force. It wasn't human, and it wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. I screamed and yanked my arm away, but the grip tightened, pulling me toward the darkness in the corner. The last thing I remember was the feeling of something pulling me into the shadows, something that would never let me go. I don't know how I got free. 1 second, I was being dragged into the darkness, my body thrashing in terror, and the next, nothing. I woke up on the cold floor of the kitchen, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. The kitchen was completely silent now. No growl, no footsteps, no clattering of anything out of place. The air felt still, almost suffocating, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. I rubbed my arm where the cold claw had gripped me, and my skin was raw, the mark of something that wasn't quite human. A burn? A scratch? It felt like both. I looked around, but there was nothing. No trace of what had just happened. But I could feel it. I could feel the presence still in the room with me. It was closer this time, so close that it seemed to be inside my head, whispering at the edges of my thoughts. Get out. The voice was soft, almost a hiss. It wasn't Andy's voice. It wasn't anyone I knew. But it was clear. So clear. Like it was inside me. I pushed myself to my feet, my knees buckling beneath me as I scrambled to the door, desperate to escape whatever this was. I had to leave. I had to get out of this place, this cursed McDonald's where everything had gone wrong. I reached for the door, but the handle wouldn't turn. I tugged at it, frantically, but it wouldn't budge. My heart hammered in my chest. That's when I heard it again, footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silent hallway. My breath hitched as I realized something, I was trapped. The door was locked, and there was no way out. I turned, my head spinning, and there, standing at the far end of the kitchen, was a figure. Tall, dark, featureless, but undeniably there. It was like it was made of shadows, a shape that shifted in the dim light, an entity that didn't belong in the world of the living. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, burned like black holes. I couldn't tear my gaze away. And then, a voice, no, a command, boomed in my head. Stay. I didn't even try to fight it. My body was frozen in place, my limbs stiff, my heart beating wildly. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. It was closer now. Too close. The shadow reached out a hand, or something that resembled a hand, and I could feel the cold, thick air wrapping around my throat, like fingers squeezing, tightening, threatening to choke the life out of me. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, when I thought the darkness would consume me entirely, a sharp light sliced through the black. A flicker of a car's headlights outside. A break in the nightmare. For one brief moment, I thought I might survive. The light from the headlights blinked like a lifeline, my only chance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to snap me out of the trance that had locked me in place. My body surged with adrenaline as I tore myself away from the shadowy figure, my legs finally obeying the desperate command to run. I bolted for the kitchen door, but it was still locked, the cold metal handle unyielding beneath my shaking hands. Panic surged again, threatening to drown me, but I couldn't stop. I had to get out. There had to be another way. I spun around, my eyes darting, scanning the kitchen for an escape. My heart raced in my ears, drowning out everything but the sound of my own breath and the deep, guttural growl that had started up again, closer than ever. It echoed from the shadows in the far corner of the room, a low, menacing rumble that made my blood run cold. Then, I saw it, the small back window above the sink. The glass was dirty, but there was just enough room for me to squeeze through if I could reach it. I ran for it, every muscle screaming, my hand already reaching up to shove aside the pile of cleaning supplies stacked beneath the window. The scraping of my palms against the metal counter seemed deafening in the silence of the room. My fingers brushed the edge of the window frame, and I climbed up, my breath ragged and labored. The window was heavy, but it slid open with a screech that felt like the world was opening up to swallow me whole. I was almost through when I heard the voice again, clearer this time, cold and venomous. "You're not leaving." A cold hand, once again, wrapped around my ankle. It yanked, hard. I screamed as I was pulled backward, my body slamming against the floor, and my head cracked against the tile. Dazed and stunned, I fought, but my limbs felt like lead. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The darkness pressed in on me, suffocating, all-consuming. But the last thing I saw before my vision blurred, before the darkness took over completely, was a shadow, reaching out toward me with hands that were no longer cold. They were burning, searing into my skin. And then, nothing. I woke up in the same place. At first, I thought it was just another nightmare, the kind that fades when you open your eyes. But when I opened them, everything was still. The cold tile beneath me, the stillness of the room, the faint hum of the freezer running in the distance, it was all real. I was back in the kitchen, lying in the same spot where the shadow had pulled me down, but there was no shadow now. The freezer door was closed, the lights flickering slightly above me, but everything seemed ordinary. I sat up slowly, my body sore, my head pounding from where it had hit the floor. My heart was still racing, my breath shallow, but I was alive. I had somehow survived. I stumbled to my feet, the terror of the past hour still clinging to me like a heavy coat. There was no sign of the entity. No growl, no footsteps, no cold hand. It was as if it had never been there at all. I backed away toward the door, my mind still reeling, my pulse thundering in my ears. I could hear my own heartbeat, but it was the only sound in the whole restaurant. But as I reached for the door again, I saw it. The floor was wet. Blood. The same trail I had seen before. The one that led into the freezer. It had been real. Andy's body had been real. The thing in the dark had been real. And somehow, I knew that it wasn't over. Whatever had happened, whatever force had taken hold of that McDonald's, it wasn't finished with me. It was still waiting. Watching. The door opened, and I ran outside into the cold night air, not caring where I went, just knowing that I had to escape. But as I looked back at the building, the lights flickered again.